first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riffs? All things concerning the riff. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson, and we're just doing that, huh, Dylan? We're just
Chainsaw Charlie down there.
Excited, man. Anything is over as long as it's presented in a box.
If it comes out of a box.
Yep.
I'm here with Dylan and Swindle. You know who these stooges are. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Hell yeah. Dylan?
Warmed up, cranked up. You gotta get ready to go for something as dense and like is forthcoming as what we're about to talk about.
Just don't do that on camera. This is a family show.
Don't crank it up.
No, that's the blue thing.
We're gonna touch on that later.
I already did that.
Yeah, we're back again for part 2 of our Thou series. I'm very excited. These are 2 really great records in the catalog. We're going to be going first with Peasant from 2008, then going straight into Summit from 2010. We listened to these albums back to back. How do you guys feel coming off of the first record, Tyrant, listening to these 2 records? What are your thoughts? How do they compare? You feel good? You feeling all right?
That's funny.
Yeah.
I'll let Swindle go first. He's the kind of center point of all these.
Fast and hopeful records. Those two albums are real fast and make you feel good.
Nah. Nah. It's okay. Just jeez. My therapist was like, "You seem more troubled than you've ever been in almost a year. What's going on?" I went, "Man, New Orleans is wild." Baton Rouge.
That's on us, though. I guess we keep coming back to Louisiana for some reason, and maybe we're just gluttons for bleak, depressing music.
There's a line in a Weed Eater song, and I can't remember the title of the song, but, Dixie Dave just kind of, that gravelly voice says, "I'm going back to West Virginia, by God." And it's like, we just keep going back to New Orleans.
Yep. Touching the stove. Yeah, these were interesting to maybe put into context from the first record. I think there are maybe elements that transfer over from the first one a little bit. I don't know. Peasant definitely kind of acts like you would expect, like bridging a gap between 2 worlds, where Summit kind of takes it and puts it in a totally different direction, in my opinion.
I agree.
As an outsider, coming into fresh into this band, Tyrant sounded like a debut. That's not a slight, but it sounded like you could hear the sums of the part, right? You could hear all the different influences. It seemed like it was more of here's these tracks we came up with. These are the first few tracks we came up with. Let's put them on paper, right? Put them on tape, whichever. Peasant sounds like it's more, I don't want to say it's more refined, because they're not quite to where what they were to become to sound like, right? It's a different part of what the band's sound is. It sounds like a Funeral Doom record to me. Just from the fact that there's actually less parts to each song. Mm-hmm. Like it seems like 1 or 2 riffs, they kind of blend off that, and it's more of it definitely feels like a more open record, right? Like the parts are a little bit longer, which is funny to say when your first record's got an 11-minute opening track. Brian is definitely far more comfortable in his role. with where vocal placement is, lyrical placement is. We'll get into the first track, which has that great ending lyric to it. But it definitely feels more of like a kind of bigger sounding record, whereas the first record maybe was a little bit tighter in the middle. Sure. But Peasant, I thoroughly enjoyed. Really enjoyed it. It's definitely the most depressing of the two we listened to, I think. Whereas I like your analogy of Summit takes it to this completely other direction, because that is if Thou made a black metal record, that was it. Like 100%.
That's what I've always thought about Summit.
Man, I mean, it's got blast beats and
Yeah, right out of the fucking gate.
Right out the gate. Like, and it's got those big washing those kind of US black metal chords that just get strummed till the point that the song ends. Like the ending of Prometheus.
It's Summit is very linear. Like
yes.
The first song, it has that part that keeps coming back, but that's pretty much the only part that comes back in the whole album, essentially. Like from there on, it's a straight line from song 2 to Reprise.
There's some variation of like the same riff kind of played throughout of it, where maybe one note will change or there'll be a bend instead of just a played note. It sounds familiar, although the part's completely different. I mean, yeah, you can get down to it that no two notes are the same, even though you play the same note. In reality, it is. But you get down to it and it's like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. A drum's changed. A snare's in a different spot. That album's more meticulous. I think that album had a lot of time spent with it. Definitely even off the listen, but man, it is. Whereas Peasant is really, really bleak. I think Summit's a little bit more bleak, it's more bleak and it leans more negatively than maybe Peasant does. Just out of the sounds, like it seems like a sharper album to me.
I think there are definitely reasons for why these albums sound the way that they do. And I want to reiterate maybe that Summit definitely gets looked at like kind of like a defining moment for this band's catalog, right? Kind of maybe, I don't want to say necessarily a breakthrough record, but I think it definitely kind of brought them to another level. And I think that process alone definitely evolved how the band writes music, how they go into the studio, how they work together, perhaps. But I will say Peasant is no slouch either. Like this is a fantastic record. Definitely some of my favorite songs that this band has written is on this record alone. Maybe we should start there. We'll start with Peasant, 2008, or maybe referred to sometimes as Peasant to Carry a Stone. This is their sophomore record. This was released in June of 2008. There are definitely a lot of labels that have reissued this album over the years, but the first version of this, I believe, just based on some of the research I've done, Autopsy Kitchen Records. It was released on CD. This is a now defunct label based in Schererville, Indiana. I don't know if you guys love going through Indiana. I know. So I don't know exactly where that is in Indiana, but this record label, again, to maybe touch on that black metal thing again, released records by Nocmistium, Nunslaughter, Xasther. Those are some of the other projects that were found on the Metallum Encyclopedia. But you also have Thou. So you have the same lineup from the first record. Mitch Wells on bass, Matthew Thudium. Again, I don't know if that's exactly how they say his name, but Matthew on guitars, Andy Gibbs on guitars, Brian Funk on vocals. Now, I think to touch on what you were saying, Dylan, finding that comfort, coming into a band on Tyrant where most of the music is already written, there's some lyrics already written. Brian essentially, from what I understand, has to kind of maybe use those lyrics as a launching pad, or like a kind of expand
kind of
upon,
a blueprint.
Right, expand on what Matthew's already written as the band's like kind of original vocalist and lyricist. Now you essentially have, I assume, free reign to just go fully in as the band's sole lyricist and kind of, thematic director in a lot of ways. I'm sure there's input from the band on, hey, we'd like to go this way. Maybe you can touch on this concept a little bit. This is kind of what I'm feeling. I'm sure there's input all around, but for the most part, we kind of know Brian as the band's main lyricist.
Do you think Mitch tried to get 311 lyrics in like all the Thou songs?
Dude, I fucking love that. This is my I love three, and I always forget too. But every time I'm like on my phone and it's like 311 and what's the 411 on 311 pops up, my favorite holiday.
Isn't there a video where he and maybe another member of the band are talking about how the vocalist of 311 isn't actually the original vocalist? It's like a stand-in.
That's the Beatles theory. They just did the Beatles theory, but for 311. There was a theory that Paul was dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a video. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
There's that, I referenced it in the last video or the last episode we did. And they're doing that Revolver video where they're talking about the different covers. And Mitch brings up a Kate cover of, I think, Paranoid or War Pigs, one or the other.
They've definitely done a Sabbath cover for sure. I think we used to play it on the radio.
Everybody else in the band just groaned heavily when he said that. I think Brian was even just like, it's terrible. And upon hearing that and like hearing you two chuckleheads like mention the 311 thing, I was like, how has 311 not done a Black Sabbath cover? Like I could picture like after seeing whatever that 311 hit is, Down, I could imagine like after hearing Down at a show and they're like, all right, here's here's Laguna Sunrise or something.
Well, maybe we'll will it into existence at this point.
Jesus Christ.
That would be nice.
Hit us up 311.
How has Thou not done a 311 cover?
Do a cover of Amber. That's the only song. That's the only one I really know. I should also mention Terry Galino as well on drums, who I definitely want to touch on for both of these records because he's all over the place. Coming off of Tyrant, where he's able to kind of stretch his chops and skills a little bit, he definitely is able to do that on this record as well. Production, recording. This was, again, another record that was recorded, mixed, engineered, mastered by the band's couple friends, Brendan Moss, Michael Talley. It was recorded, mixed, and mastered in April of 2007. This is another record that was kind of, I think, probably they had to find practice spaces and apartments to record in. Like Tyrant, I don't think that really affected how the overall album came out. It definitely feels, again, very concise and, it feels pretty cohesive and you can't really tell, I think. So it worked out in that way again.
It doesn't feel pieced together. There's definitely, for a band of this level and a band that puts this much attention into their writing, it definitely is odd seeing a band, this band release something in 2007, then like, oh yeah, we have another full length in 2008, which makes me assume that most, if not some of these songs were probably written as Tyrant was recorded, maybe, or at least in its earlier phases. Because to have that type of turnaround is pretty wild when music is this dense and this complicated, as well as the many releases in between.
That's what I was gonna say. I don't have all the dates right in front of me, but they had like probably at least half a full length just in
oh my God.
Split releases and 7 inches.
Yeah, on paper it would seem like it would be a pretty quick turnaround going from one full length to the next, but they were still busy. They were still writing and recording stuff. There was like a big wave of inspiration, it seems, just based on my reading, where this band kind of got in the studio and recorded a bunch of music. And I think that's kind of lasted through the present, where you don't just go in and record what you want for the full length. I think you're almost kind of like double dipping in a way. You're using, you're getting everything you can out of these studio sessions. These were kind of recorded sporadically through 2007, but you have Malfeasance Retribution. That EP came out in 2008, but it was recorded in September of 2007. The first split they ever did with Black September, Thrive and Decay, that came out in 2008, recorded in the fall of 2007. Their split with Leech, We Pass Like Night, From Land to Land, also in June of 2008, right before the record came out, basically. That was recorded in March of 2008. To Carry a Stone EP, July 2008. It was recorded in April 2008. So they're just like constantly in and out of the studio, constantly writing, constantly kind of honing in on their songwriting craft.
Did I hear you right when you mentioned earlier that this album was recorded in like April of 07?
It was, yeah.
Holy shit. Because so wow. Because Tyrant came out in 07.
Right. So if I go back to my other notes. So yeah, I don't have the exact date, but yeah, I mean, it was basically, I'm assuming it was recorded and mixed around the same time, maybe just before.
Yeah, I'm wondering if what you were getting at is right. They had everything, and I'm wondering if, hey, Tyrant sounds more in vein of this way. The Peasant stuff is sounding, or the songs that are different are sounding this way. Let's put them on this record. You know, maybe they like, there was a point in time, Tyrant's done. Oh, wait, we got a tour we got to go do. Let's go do a tour. Let's come back. We'll finalize this stuff. And it can sit for a while because we've got all this music that we can release, and we don't want to release 2 albums that close together. We'll at least put a year in between it. And, you know, now we can release it. So shit, like I would love like a blog or something on the process of here's X amount of music we had, and this is the plan of how we released it, so we could get it to people when they wanted it.
If only someone could ask them that.
Yeah. If it
happens, it happens. I don't know.
If it happens,
I don't know anything.
You know, looking at it and going, okay, what was the thought process? How did it end up? Did it end up that way? Obviously, I am speaking in hypotheticals here because we'll never know this, and we'll never be able to ask anything like this. Just figuring out, like, I would love to know the mindset of that, because that really intrigues me, because it's so much music. How do you determine, hey, let's not release 2-3 hours of music all up front. Let's not do a double album, which a lot of bands are prone to do. And let's release it a little bit at a time so people you can get a little bit of a break. Oh, there's excitement. Let's release this again. People will actually listen to it because we gave it a gestation period, right?
The Thou Bandcamp says that Tyrant came out in September 21st, 2007. So
okay.
They recorded Peasant 5 months before Tyrant even came out.
That's wild. Like if our information is correct, because I just want to say I'm not perfect, but if by all the dates I found, that's crazy. Where you're just like, you're already working on 2 before the debut comes out. Maybe there was like a method to the madness as far as like, okay, we're going to save this for this. Like there's a whole plan, maybe like a diagram of what's going to happen. I'm sure that these songs wound up on here because there is like, it makes sense thematically, sound wise, whereas maybe the others can be standalone. Who knows? Not sure. We'll never know.
I wonder what they were doing at the time, like as people. Like,
yeah,
I feel like they're around my age, so they would have been like,
they're not that old.
They're wow. First of all,
that was quick.
So if they're not even as old as I graduated high school in 2008, so if they're not even as old as me, they were in high school or like they were in high school basically, like when these albums came out.
Could be, maybe. I don't know how old these people are.
Well, you said they're not as old as me, motherfucker.
Oh, that way you're gotcha. I thought we were done with the joke. I'm sorry.
Were they in college, or like how did they have enough time to fucking write literally 2 full lengths and then at least another like full length of material to go on other releases and still like, you know, live lives?
From what I understand, it seems like they're trying to like capitalize on, like I read at one point, maybe on the next release, you know, in between Peasant and Summit, there were times where they were on the West Coast even, and they were recording just like, hey, we're in town, we're in California. The person they worked with, I think, was living out there. Let's just do this really quick. And then they were able to like get a few songs done at least. So again, yeah, just having the foresight to know like, okay, I think we can do this here. We can make this work. But also, yeah, it sounds very stressful. Like, I know I don't have like it in me to write as much as that. And again, I know inspiration can strike at any time, but like, goddamn, just right time, right place, I guess.
Bruce Springsteen said in his biography,
Another one of these,
that there's a point. If you write a little bit every day, the better you get.
Yeah.
And he's very evident with his catalog that he writes every single day, or he did. And I'm wondering if that was one of these scopes of like, hey, we can get better. We've got a time frame of like, hey, maybe we're just working like a couple dead end jobs, and like we've still got certain days of the week we can all get together. Some of us can get together, and we can do that. And I'm assuming during this period they all lived in Louisiana, at least within 45 minutes to an hour and a half from each other. And we're probably like, oh yeah, I can come down to the practice space on these 3 nights. We'll meet you there. Maybe someone lived at the practice space at this time. I know a lot of bands do that. But hearing about the recording process of it, like recording in different areas, that's like very Bad Brains-esque of like, hey, we've got 32 songs we just recorded last week, but we're on the East Coast or we're on the West Coast. Like, let's record them here. That's very kind of 80s hardcore kind of thing.
So we're kind of talking about the tracks. Let's get into the album itself. There are 6 tracks total, although 2 of those, I guess, are bonus tracks. Most of the editions of this release that I've heard, they feature all 6, but it seems like the first 4 are the original release of the album.
The band is very prone to releasing, like, I was telling my girlfriend last night, like, the band would release the album and then like they'd go on tour and they're like, hey, we have a CDR with the album on it and 2 other tracks.
Yeah.
And it's like, she goes, how in the hell? I go, listen, it's different. Like, when you got cool shit and you're like, you know what? We just put the record out. Here's a surprise for everybody. Pay $5, get a CDR. Like, I could just picture those old Memorex Silverfront CDRs. It just says thou in huge letters at the top, written in probably like a half dried out Sharpie. And it's got the album title at the bottom of it, +2 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's confusing, but it's hilarious in the manner of I like shit that frustrates me as much as it frustrates anybody else. Cause it's like, I've been at the point where I'm so frustrated, I just laugh. And that's kind of what I've been with this band from time to time of looking at the track list. I'm like, I'm looking at 4 separate track lists for the same album.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you telling there's a cover? Come on.
I love it. I mean, yeah, it can be kind of difficult to track down, like, all right, what version of this fucking record do I have? Like, I have one that is like a reissue from many years after this, but we'll get into, I believe, what we consider to be the initial release. We'll talk about the couple bonus tracks, but we start out with The Work Ethic Myth. Very great way to start the record. The intro of that kind of just plugging in that little feedback,
Yeah.
and then bam, it kind of reminded me of that Electric Wizard track.
Oh yeah.
I don't even remember how to pronounce it, but it's like Sabathum or something like that.
Hey, sounds like you're making words up like old Dill is.
Oh, I do.
What's the name of that record? Dope Throne.
Yeah, I'm talking about the one that's Venom Sabathi, but gets right into it, right out of the gate.
I love this kind of guitar melody riff, that very melodic guitar riff that's at the beginning of the song.
Right.
There's more melody on this record for sure. That's not saying that Tyrant didn't have those elements, but maybe the way it was projected in Tyrant it was more of like, hey, here's a part, right? Like a bridge or the track acceptance. Whereas on this record, you get it kind of on every track. I mean, there's a couple tracks on here that are really straightforward, thus finding out those are additional tracks. But there are some tracks on, like, every track on here has a melodicism to it. And it really hit to me today in preparation that, everyone kind of attributes like extreme music as not being melodic. It's just, what are you interpreting as being the melodic part? I think in traditional kind of pop song structure, yeah, the vocals are the melody, right? The vocals are the hook, that kind of thing. Whereas when you get to extreme music, because it's such an open book. There's no rules. The melody could literally be, the melodic part could be a guitar line, like in this, or something in like earlier Paul Bearer. You get the melody bit from the guitar. Look at going back to our High on Fire episode, D2. The melodic part is the guitar part.
Yeah, I was saying in the last episode, this is like the first song I distinctly remember listening to by Thou. I had listened to their shit before, but I like have a very specific memory of sitting in fucking Whole Foods parking lot and just the opening riff of this song plays, and I was like my pupils fucking dilated, and I was like, oh shit.
It's that Beavis and Butthead scene in Do America when
exactly. Everything becomes it becomes a Rob Zombie music video.
Just like that, your life was ruined forever.
Right.
Man.
Yeah.
I feel like the tone of this is like noticeably better.
Yep. Yes.
And it could be that, again, you mentioned the first record definitely sounds like a first record.
Mm-hmm.
These are likely all guys that I'm sure they have like been around. They've played in bands before, but working together as a unit, even with the engineers or the people recording the record, you're all working together. Like, okay, maybe we do this differently, or like I noticed this on the first record. Maybe we just like turn the knob a little bit over here. The tone, the dynamic of it definitely sounds just a little bit more. I don't know if I should say thicker or what, but the sonic quality is definitely improved upon from the first.
It's
record.
bigger. It's fatter sounding for sure. There's more of a sonic weight to it.
Mm-hmm.
I like the mixing on this record a lot. Like you can actually hear, pan left guitar, pan right guitar, leads are in the middle. And I love the fact that you can hear that as well. Like you can hear the different instruments. As we get into Summit as well, there's even a different mix on that one that I was like, holy shit, what are we doing now? Like, this is great. But the mixing on this album is, as you said, it's a bigger step up from the Tyrant mix as well. But you're right. I think it is the working with the same group of people working together, learning of, coming in a little bit more prepared, or maybe just going, hey, let's not do that thing again. Let's do something a little bit different and move forward. And how can we make the bigger picture better?
I noticed with the mix too, like, I mean, this is a guitar band.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
100%.
right up front in your face.
Yep.
Which definitely gave me the vibe as far as like a black metal dynamic, where Brian's vocals are they're there. At least on this first song, it's like kind of behind the guitars a little bit. It's kind of like not straining, but it's just like there, and it's like
you're right.
There's something very eerie about that. There's something very dark, and that presence of like the vocals sitting right behind the guitar mix, where it's like, okay, I've heard this on a number of black metal records before. There's definitely some sort of influence with that, or at least that's the way I interpreted it.
That's exactly how I took it. He's mixed in the back a little bit. He is mixed in a manner that makes the vocals more of another instrument, as opposed to it's a vocal line. He's the vocalist. He's the singer. Let's jump on that. We know he's there. We know the sounds he's making. We know they're like, they're strained, they're angry, they're venomous, they're upset. Let's mix them a little bit further so it sounds like, oh, he's wailing from a fucking pit. And it's fitting. For this music, it's fitting. It's doom, it's stoner, it's fucking borderline death metal at this point. And I got that same immediate response to that.
It's also fitting for their specific attitudes.
Yes.
None of them really, they don't have like the ego thing that's like, I need to be fucking heard. But also Brian in interviews has said like he makes his lyrics kind of vague, like intentionally vague, so that people could like interpret them different ways. And I think that also he may like not want his vocals to be like right fucking there as part of that, possibly.
Yeah. As far as the lyrics go on this song, I would imagine this fits right in line with the title of the record, or at least that's like how I kind of read into it, which is like
Hearing the ending line of this song, him just screaming "spineless bastards," is like, all right, I'm 35. You know, I've been working the way I've been working for as long as I have, and I have been touted as the reliable person with a great work ethic. And I realized a few years ago that like, oh, what have I done to myself? I get it.
nobody cares.
Nobody gives
they
a
don't give a
shit.
shit. What I mean is,
Nobody
they
cares.
They don't give a fuck about you. Oh, what was I get? Sorry, I just had a thought. Stupid. My eyes are getting weary. My back is getting tight. Sorry. That's the things that are that's just in my head all the time. Just
Hey man, that's what Springsteen record is that on? Is that on the river?
Yeah. I forgot Bruce Springsteen wrote the intro to the King of Queens theme song. It sounds like it would be.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's there.
He probably, the guy that wrote the theme song probably wrote it being like, what if Bruce Springsteen wrote a sitcom soundtrack, what would it sound like?
Does King of Queens takes place in New York, which isn't too far from New Jersey.
I've heard that New York is just like
It's northern Jersey, yeah.
Northern New Jersey.
Yeah.
it's kind of like Chicago is just North Indiana.
Yes.
Shut up. It's not.
Yes.
What are we doing? You know it's it's not even above it. What do you mean? Like not in that way. Give me a map. The next song, An Age of Imprisoned. An 11-minute song.
More feedback.
Yeah, a little bit. Also, is this in the major key? Like this it just feels brighter at times, I guess. I don't know. Like I'm not the best with theory, but there are like the intro of this song. There are some like more, like kind of brighter chord phrasings and little, flourishes here. It sounds huge as shit. Don't get me wrong. And it's like, it sustains just as hard as any of their music. But I noticed as whatever chords that they have like chosen for this particular song, there are some, it's kind of like brighter, maybe more uplifting sounding.
I mean, you can use major chords in a minor key. I
don't want to break your brain. I don't know personally.
No,
but like,
I mean, Swindle can attest to this. You can, I mean, if there is a C note in a minor scale, you can play a C major chord in a minor scale, but as long as you follow it up in the chord, the scale pattern in the minor scale pattern, it's still a minor scale. So, I mean, big like C, G, F, D, A, those, I mean, you can still incorporate those into a minor scale. It's just what you follow it up with. It's the Ricky line from Trailer Park Boys. It's remarkable what you can get away with saying if you phrase it right.
I know what you're talking about, like, especially the very opening the chords. I get that too. I'm
probably wrong. It just sounded, I don't know if that's exactly what it is, like as far as like major, minor, whatever, but it stuck out to me, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Hell, it could be a blues scale. I mean, the blues scale just has the flatted fifth in it. And even it kind of sounds major.
I really like the second part of the song with the kind of like mathy, bridgey part that's like immediately after that opening riff. Da 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 da.
Yeah.
Da, da, and they like keep doing variations of that riff.
Beat it to
like,
death.
Yeah. It reminds me of like Coalesce. Like 012. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I did write that in here as well. That almost mathy guitar break at around 3 minutes. It was fun. It happens like around that mark, and then the other thing that kind of stood out to me, and this happens a lot through their music as well, where every strike of the chord is like always like kind of accent, like with a fucking drum hit. So it just feels like you're just getting bum bum bum, like just constantly hitting the head with something. Like every hit, it just like it's almost like a combo breaker in a game where like like when
that driving riff, that kind of Coalesce-esque riff, that is something. Like they beat it to death, like they come back to it, and that's kind of what I said in the earlier when we were talking about the first track on the record. is they just change one note each time they play it. So it's a different part. You know, it's linear, it's moving straight through, right? But it's still the same part in theory. It's just that one note will be different. It's like, God, what are we doing? What are we listening to, guys? You listen to Breadwinner? Like, come on, you know, this is, and they could have been, you know, Breadwinner's a Virginia tech kind of tech metal band that helped Lamb of God become who they are. So I wouldn't doubt that there's some, you know, kind of cross Southern pollination going on there. But it's definitely remarkable to see them go, hey, and it had to be planned. Like, I get that they were, you know, very much a let's get in the room, let's figure this out kind of band. But there was definitely a plan of action of going, what if we play this part, change the note here, change the note here, and we only come back to that first one time after that. And it's usually later in the song that they do it.
I like this one kind of has a little bit, this song in particular has kind of a little bit of crossover from Tyrant 2 in that it has that kind of spacey part, although I think this is far more Doom like centric
100%.
than Post, if that makes sense. I feel like it is slow as shit. It's less maybe, I don't know, that like tone, that lead tone that we were kind of talking about in the first episode. It's there, but it's different. Like that, like we said, with kind of evolving.
In the Big Brave album Vital, they specifically thank Thou. They're like, thank you, Thou. And I like this riff is probably why.
Yeah.
Because it is just like, the song is like 11 minutes and kind of 4 or 5 minutes of it is the same riff.
Yeah.
Over and over and over.
Which is really cool because the way it kind of plays out, it almost just unravels from kind of like, it has all these different parts at first, right? There's some like lead lines, this like really heavily like kind of delay bends. And then it kind of just unravels into, it's just literally, what is the foundation of this thing, right? Like it's just the riff. And then all of a sudden it's just nothing and it's just feedback and it fades out. So it's just slowly kind of shedding itself of all of the details and all of the things until it is quite literally nothing, which is awesome.
You shed every note from the actual riff. That's kind of Doom, right?
That's what
that's what you're getting at. Whereas on Tyrant, as you said, it was more post-rock where the bridges or the big riffs had more layers to them, more flourishes. It's not to say that there's not multiple guitar tracks going on here, but they're like, here's these 4 blocks. That's what you're getting. And we're slowly but surely going to pull an 1/8 away from the block, a 1/4 away from the block. That's very doom metal, like sparse, but massive sounding, right?
Yeah.
Very Sun influenced.
Sure.
That is a Sun thing. I got big Candlemass vibes on this track. Like in the midst of listening to it, it was like, all right, where's Messiah Marcelone or whatever his last name is like, is he going to come out? Are we going to get this big belted like falsetto or something? That's definitely more of like traditional, like old school doom, but it's there. Like a little bit of it is there.
You get like this, 11-minute kind of journey, this like opus. And again, it's like very challenging shit. So, as far as like a bit of a palate cleanser, you go right into Belt of Fire to Guide Me, Cloak of Night to Hide Me. And you get like some dynamics here with, these like these cleans and these like sparse hi-hat and drums. And, that it feels nice to go from such like a long 11-minute soul crushing song. And they did it again where you get lulled into this sense of comfort.
Oh,
where you're like,
comfort.
Oh, whew, fuck. Did we just do that for 11 minutes? God damn. And then it doesn't even last like 40 seconds tops.
Yep.
Like, and then we're right back into it. We're right back into
40
it.
40 seconds is how long that that riff lasts one time through.
Right.
The opening of this makes me think of A Sun That Never Sets by Neurosis. It opens up like very sparse, just kind of drums. Like you could almost line them up. I'm sure these guys have definitely listened to Neurosis. It's there. It's part of it, but like I heard that and went, yep, that's a sun that never sets. And I'm okay with it because that's another impactful track too. And as you said, 40 minutes in, it kind of kicks into this almost groove. It's with drone and like doom music like this, sometimes there's a groove there, but how it's so spread out and how big it sounds, it doesn't quite kick into a groove. Like you can definitely just pace the drums up a little bit with it and change the feel of it and give it a swing or something, but it's almost like it's veering. The trains are kind of running off the track a little bit, which I like. There's a danger to it of like, there's a groove there, but it's not quite locked in yet.
That opening quiet riff lives in my head. And also the vocal line, "Red am I in battle, red the raven at my heels." Just like, it's always right. It's like always right here.
When that breaks at the end, where it's just like Brian and the guitar, and he said, "Red am I in battle," and then it kind of is as gang vocals, I would have to imagine. Like, it just seems like it kind of, there's a group of people. It doesn't just seem like Brian unless it's like layered or whatever, but it definitely feels like there are multiple people in the room kind of shouting the same thing. I like this song. To touch on Brian, while there is that kind of like false sense of comfort, I think this is like perhaps the most visceral and kind of like he is screaming with like everything he has as soon as that like main kind of wall of sound punches in through the cleans. There's also this like really great, this band does it a lot, great double guitar kind of descending riff, and then it like switches on a dime to like the tempo and does this really awesome, again, like two like twin guitar, like one finger kind of like riffs. That's some
Black Sabbath shit. That 100%. Sounds like sounds like the time change in Iron Man. Like as soon as I heard that, I was like, that's the thing. That's the Geezer Butler Bill Ward shit. It sounds like Sabbath mixed with like I Hate God. Like I Hate God is a really good representation of that thing. And it just like the way the riff is played, but the rhythm section kind of plays it more in like a Sabbath feel, whereas like the riff is like pure New Orleans sludge.
Yeah.
What I loved about this track is like, especially being lulled into like false security or like, you know, there's this great dual harmony in the middle of the song that makes me think of like, oh, that sounds like something off of NOLA. That sounds like Pepper Keenan and like Kirk like playing with each other. And it definitely sounds like kind of Stone the Crow-esque. I got this like weird vibe of like those kind of Southern rock kind of harmony lines in there. And it's just, it doesn't sound anything like it, but it just evoked that feel of that. And that's just growing up in the South. You know, it's what's the Jimmy Bower line? Bend the note. I mean, it's there. And it's so cool to hear maybe those early influences that everybody had with like listening to music with their dad or like listening to music while you're, you know, with one of your parents or whoever, and maybe not directly listening to that, but internalizing that and going back later and going, shit, this is good stuff.
I listen to that with my dad all the time.
That is very fitting. I do too.
He's like, oh, fuck. God damn it.
He's right over there somewhere.
I fucking loved the end of the song when the "Red Am I in Battle" part comes back at the very end, and it's like, I think it starts off double timed, and then they go back to normal time, and then at the end they do the fucking ass beating halftime with the tom fills, or the tom beat instead of like hi-hats or cymbals or whatever. I just like fucking squish my head together with my hands when they halftime it.
Ass beater is the right way to describe that. This band does the drone thing really well. I didn't quite finish my notes here that I've kind of taken control of. But some bands do the drone thing and it doesn't play out very well. It feels like one thing the entire time. This band does it without making it feel like it's just the same thing for 8.5 for 11 minutes. You know, there are some bands in this subgenre that will do that and write really long songs. And it's fine that they did that, but it just feels like you're playing the same thing.
Yeah.
For that long.
You could say that some of those bands write one very, very long song, and that's what they're popular for.
Don't know.
And see, that's the thing is no one knows who I'm talking about because there's so many bands that do that. I could name a handful right now.
There is a magic to writing long form music,
yes,
and it not feeling that way.
Yes.
It's the same thing with movies for sure. Like I'd like plenty of like 3 fucking hour movies. Some of them are not able to, you know, hold your attention for that long, I guess. So that there is a magic to that. One last thing I wanted to mention about this track too, talk about Black Sabbath. Terry doing some like Bill Ward-esque shit on this song too. Again, with that sort of simplistic kind of straightforward riffing style. Somebody is going to be there to fill out the space and do some of the fills and shit. Terry is all over this fucking song doing that shit. Speaking on the drums too, with that kind of vocal line repeating in the outro, there's like I don't know if it's like more traditional drums or if it's like mixed different. It kind of sounds like the way it is. It almost sounds like Going to War. The way this kind of fucking ends. There's some
it's fucking
other
primal.
Definitely like rhythmically very interesting.
With the toms,
the floor toms, yeah.
That's some Sepultura shit at the beginning of Refuse Resist. Like just those kind of tribal, like primal sounding drums kicking in, or like something off of like Souls at Zero. Like, yep, there's Going to War is the right phrase to use with that.
Then we get into a fucking all-time track. This is a fucking, if there is like a, you know, Thou Hall of Fame, they inducted Burning Black Coals and Dark Memories, like at least a couple years, maybe a year after its eligibility.
First ballot.
This is like kind of like we mentioned in the last episode. Fucking Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean, Burning Black Coals and Dark Memories were like the 2 songs that I really that were like my introduction to this band, and I like never went back. And again, another song that has that false sense of comfort, although the
sure
cleans
does.
are bleak and so emotive. Like it's a very, the way they have constructed the song, like every bit of this is like so dramatic and big sounding. And when I listen to that intro, I almost like always envision myself kind of like on a boat. I don't know why. It's
Yes.
like I'm on a boat and it's dark and I can't see anything. And I don't know if it's the like the reverb or the effects that are being used. It just sounds very like being on open water to me. That's just how I've interpreted it all these years, because when it explodes into that fucking first line of "My mistakes light up the sky," like, holy shit. Wow. Holy crap, dude. That is like,
yeah.
As a young man, and I'm still just a boy at heart, but getting into like this form of music, that like, whoa, what is happening here? This is crazy. There's so much more to this band to be understood and get into. And this was definitely like the light went off and I'm ready for it. So I don't know, any thoughts on this particular song?
I think I played this for everyone because, like, unlike fucking Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean, there ain't no fucking hiding what Thou is in that song. But you can you can hook people through the beginning of this song before you get into the fucking like when the like soaring lead stops and then they get into the boo-doo,
Yeah.
doo-doo,
That could be a multitude of tracks.
Yeah.
That lead line though is crazy. It is so, again, that melodic thing, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
Yep.
it is, that thing like is always seared into the back of my brain. Like I could be anywhere in the world. If I'm reminded of that song, I'll just think of it. I'll think of it.
The opening is the interplay of all the instruments at the beginning. It's very, very Spiderland-esque, just with some of those tracks that were on there. But that goes into that unsettling feeling. I'm glad you mentioned like being on open water, because this definitely has that. This band's got kind of an oceanic feel to it. Not to, compare it to an ISIS record at all, but it's definitely has an oceanic kind of feel to it. Like this band feels like you're in water, or you're treading water, or you're drowning, and there's just this very, very eerie feeling with that.
To me, it's like sludge in a different way. It's sludge, but not crowbar sludge. It sounds like a swamp, but like just not. It sounds like a swamp in a heavy way. It just sounds muddy and nasty, and like there's algae hanging off your arms when you stand up out of the water.
Hey man, this is the same swamp that they had in the second Creep Show. Like it's that same swamp, that big like tar monster. You're right. There's something very ugly and filthy about the way this band sounds, and this track is a great representation of that. There are some very pretty parts with like some of these lead lines and the melodicism to it, but you're right. Crowbar, for reference, kind of sounds just like a tried and true heavy metal band at its core, right? Like classic rock, old school British heavy metal stuff. Like it sounds like that. I Hate God sounds like a punk band listening to Black Sabbath. Some of the other ones, for like Goat Whore, for reference, sounds like a black metal band, 100%. This band this would be the closest representation for modern bands that sound like sludge. Like this band kind of created a new thing. They added another, wart to sludge music in their own way.
And it's clear that they're influenced too, and I'm sure we'll touch on this as we go along. I mean, you mentioned Big Brave. I mean, there's a band literally called Chained at the Bottom of the Ocean because of this band, right? So it's super cool. And, this song alone, I think you could probably make a playlist or mixtape of Thou tracks. This would certainly end up on my, you got to listen to this song. No question about it. It's coming.
Dylan brought up the fucking end
Oh
vocal
my
line
God.
of the work ethic myth. The end vocal line of this fucking song, I'm the beginning and I am the end. And then he repeats that a second time, and the music is cut out, or it's just feedback the second time he says it. And I was just like, oh, fuck. I believe you, Brian. You are the end.
That's a very Black Flag thing. That's a very like Rollins era, like My War Black Flag thing. Like
gee, mister, I get it. It's okay.
that visceral kind of thing of exactly just repeating something till it's just, hey, it's almost like getting in a fight and the guy's not letting up. Like you're like,
Stop it, he's dead already.
There you go. Yes.
I mean, we haven't gotten to it yet, but behind the mask, another mask.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. There's tons of those.
Austin, you mentioned it when we started talking about this track of like being a very young man and hearing this track for the first time and going like, I already felt real great about myself. So like, I'm going to listen to this. There's another album that hit me like this song does, and that was the first time I heard Rollins Band's The End of Silence. It felt real great. Felt good already. Heard that album and went, I am okay with being in this hole. I'm okay with isolation. Let me just get in my... It's like Bobby Hill in like the flashback when they're in the whack-a-mole thing for Y2K, and he's in that tomb of like toilet paper. He's like, it's comfortable, it's soft, I'm in here, and reverts. Same thing. This track gives you that same emotion.
I didn't realize that the next two tracks, like initially, this was the end of the album. That's a great way to fucking end an album.
It sure is.
Now, I will say that these are also maybe opposed to the first record, where I think those tracks kind of work better as the EP, perhaps. They're great songs, nothing wrong with them. I think you could essentially add these, and I think they do work as like a full piece rather than the extra bits or whatever. So getting into sorry, go ahead.
So you're about to lead into it. I was really bummed to see that this was a bonus track, because like this is like on the record the riff to me.
The opening.
Yes.
I mean, touching on Kirk, I wrote in my notes for this song, that intro riff, it might be one of the heaviest parts of the album. And it kind of reminded me of that quote of like Kirk saying, like, you just need that one riff, right?
Yep.
You can build everything from that one riff. And I mean, it's basically variations of that riff, like we've been kind of touching on. You can really do so many things with just that single riff. It all starts from there. And I guess that's kind of why we're doing this shit, right?
God damn, what a riff. I heard that. I was in the kitchen one day, like had that little Bluetooth speaker on I've got. And I heard that riff. I went, God damn. Yeah, these guys didn't listen to Crowbar at all. Like I heard that and went, yep, this is what it's all about. This is why we do this dumb show that we do. It's fuck. It is. The whole track is kind of just variations of that riff, but it makes it so good that it is just variations of that riff.
Yeah, I would put that opening riff up there, like the heaviness. I would put it up there with like Fucking Chained and like Transcending Dualities from Magus or Magus or whatever. Just like top 5 maybe heaviest Thou riffs. It's definitely up there for sure.
I also like that, you know, again, kind of like with the previous song, those really dramatic lead lines are so important. And it's like, it's obviously present on Tyrant. I think it kind of finds its way here very well. It kind of guides you, and it really dictates like a lot of the times like how I feel, you know, for a particular song for sure.
Those melodies are kind of a signature Thou thing. And to be able to kind of already know what some of your band's characteristics are, second album in, I mean, that's pretty good. Like knowing like, all right, this is kind of our thing. This is one of our strong points.
And it was possibly recorded at like the same fucking time as their first album.
Fucking crazy. Again, with the mix too, with Brian's vocals, you know, I don't know if this is purposeful, but you know, as far as like they stretch out their hands, it kind of illustrates a certain vibe to me, especially when Brian's vocals are like kind of in the backseat a little bit, like mix wise, where it feels like he is calling out. It's faint. It's like, I'm reaching out to you almost like the listener. Like that's so effective. Like this song was, I'm glad that you can listen to this album and this is like on here as kind of the full piece. Like the moments like that definitely make it like really important for me.
It's kind of weird. Again, thinking that this wasn't supposed to be on the album because one of the riffs in the middle of the song or like near the end, it sounds like they're calling back to that Belt of Fire to Guide Me, Cloak of Night, like that very quiet riff that's at the beginning of that song. It sounds like they're like rehashing that riff in the middle of the song.
There's some it's right before the ending of the song kicks in. There's like a transition portion. That sounds like the transition in God of Emptiness before it kicks into the kind of the hokey part. Those like before it kicks into the bow to me part. But I heard those notes and went, God, that's Morbid Angel. Like that's early Morbid Angel era. And it just shows that pronounced kind of heaviness is there. Like they can take something that sounds very much like an influence, and it's already turning into, oh, this is our thing now. We've already given it our feel of it. And that adds to what you talked about earlier, Swindle, with it just feeling like the grossest swamp you've ever seen. Like, you know, it's not the swamp you go to and you can go fishing in. It's the swamp where you're like, hey, there's a fence around it with razor wire on top of that. Like, you're not getting in. We've had too many people pulled in by the gators.
Ending on the final track of the record, The Road of Many Names. I'm sure that you probably got this as well, but very I Hate God-esque sounding riff. Probably the fastest one on the record. I think it also plays with speeds too. And also kind of that I don't know, like droning kind of driving thing. It sounds like a fucking buzzsaw, like the way that fuzz and distortion kind of sculpts the tone of the guitar. You know, and then there's like, of course, like a bit of noise and kind of cleanish lines as well. Also, I noticed too, playing with the panning, I was listening with headphones on.
Oh my God.
That it kind of like, oh wait, where are the, like,
yes.
I was so kind of entranced with the song that, you know, you're in it, right? And then so the moment it starts kind of fucking around with your head a little bit, you're like, oh wait, what?
Hearing that, this has again another old school, at least to my like ear, another old school kind of like stoner / doom feel to it. This actually hits to your neck of the woods, Austin. I got Trouble vibes.
Oh, cool.
In the harmonies on this. Like I was like, this is something off like Psalm 9.
Aurora, Illinois' own, baby.
Yep. Swindle's gonna hate me for this part, but the ending melody that the actual track ends on sounds like the beginning of Falling Away From Me from Korn. Like it's that same kind of sparse single note kind of evocative thing.
That riff, that melody, they played every fucking way you could possibly play it in this song. They played that one riff for so long. So eventually they had to get to Korn. Like you could only play metal so many ways before you get to Korn. So they did it all in that song. They had to get there.
Do you know how hard it is to tune really low and have to analyze everything to go, I have to make sure it doesn't sound new, because once you get to like sub B tunings, it can. And you got to go, all right, I got to change the way my hand is sitting just a little bit to not make it sound like that. But when you're tuned that low, and as you said, and you play the riff over and over in different ways, you're like, well, I got to play it this way. And I'm sure that never dawned on them at all, because why would it? But I suspect that somebody's in this band, because of how low they tune, definitely listen to that stuff, probably more so Deftones than anything.
It's all the same, right? It's like all F sharp on this record, like from start to finish.
It definitely seems like in the notes that I had, it is. I think those two additional tracks, yeah, everything's in F sharp. So that would be more of like a drop F sharp that they're in. Which means basically, your lowest string is an F sharp. The next string would be a normal C sharp on a standard 6-string guitar.
The end of the Korn part to you, it is another. It sounds like a lullaby.
Yeah, a music box.
A broken music box just playing us out immediately after they had just played it in like a fucking Black Sabbath minor third or like minor fifth version of that riff.
So clocking in 42 minutes, 53 seconds. I mentioned originally this was released on CD by Autopsy Kitchen Records, Peasant to Carry a Stone. So the CD bonus tracks would also later appear on the 7-inch vinyl to Carry a Stone by Noxious Noise Records. A 12-inch vinyl by Level Plane Records was released in July of 2008 per that website when I was looking through it. Gilead Media also reissued this with a limited edition remastered version. And I actually have a double LP released by Robotic Empire in 2017, which I have here. It looks sick, dude. I fucking loved how this came out. It's got like this booklet and everything like that.
I got that one coming my way.
I think, I don't know if I believe this is, I don't know if there's any other versions of this out, but I think this was like when I saw this in the store, I think I was at like Reckless Records downtown. So I was like, I have to have this. This comes with a couple of things. So it features the album, the To Carry a Stone portions, the bonus tracks. You also have a cover of Aneurysm by Nirvana, which I know they have like covered Nirvana to death. Like they've had like splits
not in a
with
bad way.
No. Like they've just, I'm not talking shit. But the thing that was confusing was that like I was trying to find the thing that was confusing about it was I thought like, all right, where did this originally appear on? And I was like looking through everything and I couldn't find it. Like I couldn't find this particular cover. And I thought it was maybe on the Hearst Collective like split, but the Hearst Collective actually covered this song. So I couldn't actually find where this originally appeared. And it seemed like through my notes and research, they've been covering this song as early as like 2010, 2011, like maybe even before that. But I don't know if this was like the first appearance of it. I could be wrong. Didn't find it. If you know, comment below. Let me know where I missed that. But very, very cool. I really, if you're a fan of like physical copies of shit, this was like a no-brainer. This was so cool.
I like the I mentioned it in the previous episode, but the similar to Tyrant, it's probably the Gilead version. There's like a version that has the red, black, and white art,
Yes.
and I think it's a person being hung, which isn't ideal, but it is. I just like the style of art, the like very stark colors. Yeah,
it's very striking for sure.
It's wild to know. Again, this band is a very adamant in like releasing different artwork for different releases and all that. It's so wild to see that all of them are just those wood cuttings or the wood cut artworks for like the digital formats and everything. It's even like Magus or Magus, however it's pronounced, has one as well. But the copy I have, which I think the copy both of you guys have, is the two individuals on the cover holding each other, right?
Yeah.
Heathen is that old photo from like, God, got to be the 1800s, maybe the early 1900s of the person with long hair. But there's also a woodcut version of that. And Swindle, I didn't realize there was another cover of that one you had.
Oh yeah, I completely fucking, when I pulled that record out, I was like, what even album is this?
Yeah.
Like, I haven't looked at this shit in forever.
And
but yeah,
I love how this band approaches artwork. I love it. Because I mean, the copy of, Peasant that Austin's got is, I've only seen that version of that Robotic Empire version. Like that's the only time I've seen that artwork.
Kind of rounding out this record with a little bit of the touring that they did around this release. It seemed like from June of 2008 to July, they were going all over the place. They played alongside bands like Pygmy Lush, who we mentioned in the last episode. You had bands like Mammoth Grinder and Salome, who they eventually did a split with.
Rad band.
And we know the vocalist of that band is fucking insane, right? Black September, another split. A run of dates with Leech, who again they also did another split with. For rounding out the dates back home. They also, I found, they had like some sporadic dates throughout the rest of the year. They played 2 nights with Sun in October of 2008, which kind of makes sense because, Southern Lord did a handful of reissues on this. Apparently, Thou also was one of the bands that performed on like a South by Southwest, like that Southern Lord kind of orchestrated or curated
showcase.
So pretty cool. Transitioning from the sophomore release into Summit, third record released in June of 2010, Gilead Media. I kind of found a quote from Andy where it said, kind of mentioned before, we wrote a chunk of songs after Peasant and recorded them in a marathon recording session. Those songs were dispersed among a bunch of different splits. From then on, our recording sessions have been dual purpose, like I mentioned earlier. With Summit, for instance, we recorded a handful of other songs used for EPs and odds and other. So just kind of, again, to paint this picture of a band just really, like maybe even the Soundgarden thing that we talked about, from that record, that was just like maybe a moment of inspiration for the band where you, all of a sudden you have all of these songs and now you got to figure out like, all right, where are these going to go? They certainly found like a great purpose and theme for this record. Everything is like, this is like, we talked about like building up and making a step forward on Peasant. This is like taking it to a whole nother level on this record.
We brought up before we started talking about Peasant, how that album could kind of be viewed as a transition between Tyrant and what this record is. And Peasant and this record sound very similar, but still are completely different albums. Peasant is very doom, very dirgy, very like set in like that more, caveman kind of vibe, the knuckle dragger riffs and everything. This is a little bit more, as Swindle put it, this is a linear record. But this one's also a little bit more visceral sounding to my ear. With the different types of parts to the songs and the way the vocals are kind of even more pushed kind of in the ground, and the way the guitar chords are played, just everything about it. And from the opening, track to what I thought was going to be a 6-track album ends up being a 4-track album. This so far has been my favorite of the 3.
It's also kind of it's the first album that kind of features other instrumentation, right?
Yes.
Like the
Horns.
first full-length album, and piano and violin.
Strings. Yep.
We'll get all into that. I definitely want to touch on some of those players. But yeah, it just elevates it to a whole new level. And yeah, some of those other influences coming in on this record. But to note on the production, especially, that it sounds sharper. Sharper. And even the drums, the first thing I noticed was like the snare popping, like the snare hit was like, yeah, it's much, much different. You have the same individuals as far as like the core group of the band: Mitch, Andy, Matthew, Brian, Terry. This is Terry's last record.
That's what I was thinking.
Before being replaced by Josh. But yeah, you mentioned you have like a bunch of guest appearances as well. You have Derek Zimmer, who provides some additional vocals on this record. He also appears on Heathen and the Sacrifice EP from 2014. We mentioned Emily McWilliams from the previous episode when we were kind of running through our EPs and splits and stuff. Frequent Thou collaborator, appears on the Leech split. She's also performing some like vocal parts and piano. She has songwriting credit on our Enemy Civilization split. On Heathen, she's like kind of a really important part to Inconsolable as well. Magus on the Audio Tree part. I think she's probably even on the NPR Tiny Desk, because I'm almost fairly certain they're performing all of the Inconsolable stuff. But you also have some locals too, some other locals that are in some different forms of music. Amanda Worstlin, I apologize if I mispronounced that, viola. Just upon searching up, I found that Amanda was a member of the Loyola University of New Orleans Chamber Orchestra. So definitely some classically trained individuals on this record. Daniel Ray on trombone. And then you have the Why Are We Building Such a Big Ship Orchestra for filling in on additional horns. I think this was like a group of people that kind of like a big collective of people who formed around like 2005, 2006. So yeah, you just have like this whole kind of like brass instrument section that really shine in some later tracks on this album.
How does Thou get in a room with these classically trained musicians and go, this is what we're playing. Can you give us a transcription? No.
Maybe.
But my finger goes here. I go back to like, there were those Metallica videos that came out in the early 90s, like a year and a half. And Hetfield was talking about, Nothing Else Matters is going to have strings. I don't know how to show. I play the 7th fret. Kind of thing. I mean,
I would be interested to hear how that came about. Maybe they wrote out the parts. Maybe they didn't. You did a the review on the Siverus record, Maze Envy. Those parts were all written out beforehand.
Yep.
Like he provided, the guitar player of that band, as I understand, he like transcribed that stuff. Now, I also know that he has like a background in jazz music and such, but I don't know. Yeah, it'd be interesting if you just like had a bunch of these people who I'm sure you maybe know from the area, and you're like, all right, here's the riff. Kind of go buck wild with it.
Yep.
And that could have happened for sure. So one thing that definitely stands out about this record, aside from it being there's more of a gap, so maybe you have more time to kind of think things out and be meticulous with it. It's also the first record, or at least the first full length, that was recorded in maybe a more proper studio setting. So this was an album that was recorded at the Living Room Studios in Algiers, Louisiana.
That's the name of the comp.
By God.
Wow.
Oh,
mate. So you're telling me.
Louisiana.
Louisiana. There's cores in the gator.
Does that mean Oakland is the place too? What?
Oakland, Kentucky, duh.
So yeah, recorded at the Living Room Studios in Algiers, Louisiana, February of 2010. Yeah, so it should be noted that we've been touching on a lot of the records previous or the recording sessions before this record were recorded in various different practice spaces, maybe apartments, what have you. This was recorded with James Whitten. This is a recording studio that was kind of built from, like, I think this was a former church that was redone with some like really cool analog equipment. And then they get James Whitten to record and mix the record. And so from my reading, I found that James had recorded with the band before while they were on tour in the Bay Area. They stopped, in Oakland, basically, where I think James was living. So they recorded some of that stuff. And then they also recorded with James in New Orleans a little bit too. James has also worked on Heathen. He mixed and recorded that record. He recorded Mages. He also recorded and mixed The Helm of Sorrow with Emma Ruth Rundle a few years later. So James has also worked with Bargas. God, I'm going to get that eventually, hopefully. He's also worked with I Hate God. So, just really kind of all in the thou world for sure.
The tidbit you mentioned about it's a church that was converted to an analog studio, that would be a good process of kind of cleansing that filth from the country is just turning every single church that exists that's got value to it into a recording studio. Use it for something useful and productive.
Not to go on to too much of a political tangent, but
Not the political.
No, but I'm about to say something.
Oh,
but every time I see a building that like a church, like there's a church in Louisville on Bardstown Road that's now like a Mexican restaurant.
God, that's beautiful.
And I'm like, I like that. I like this, but I don't know if capitalism or religion is worse. So yeah. I'm not sure if I really appreciate this fully.
In Bowling Green,
I was about to say,
yeah,
they turned a church into a Greek restaurant.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty much but then they got all the fucking
they sure
cop lovers in that Greek restaurant.
That's right.
It's the same people.
Yeah.
Robble.
Fuck it all.
But no, definitely convert all churches to the Norwegians had it wrong. They should have just been turning them into recording studios rather than setting them on fire. Use the buildings.
Right, yeah.
Good ceilings for drum tracking.
The other thing about this recording process that I read about, and I didn't really find any quotes about the previous albums either, so maybe it was there, maybe it wasn't. But for this one specifically, Brian had mentioned in, I think, a Decibel interview that Summit and the stuff we did with that had a lot of starts and stops and different spurts, right? Some of the songs got scrapped or totally reworked. We wrote the last couple songs for that record the week before we hit the studio.
Oof.
It was pretty stressful. I'm proud of Summit, but it wasn't as expansive as I hoped it would be. We hadn't had other records on our plate at the time. We probably could have included Voices in the Wilderness and Bonacare. Sorry if I mispronounced that, on that record. Then again, if we had included those songs, which we had written earlier on, we wouldn't have had the pressure on us to write Grisicon or Another World is Inevitable. Regardless, to me, all of those songs, even though they fit together, still sound like they could have used a little bit more refining, either in the studio or at the practice space. I'm really proud of Summit, but I've always felt like it got an inordinate amount of attention and acclaim compared to our other releases. Thoughts on that?
Hearing him say that this isn't as expansive as he wanted it to be is wild because, it's a dense album.
Yeah.
But then we'll talk about it in the next, in another episode. But Heathen is fucking wild.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's an expansive record. So if they had more time, you could have got something that sounded more in line with that on this record possibly, but with more of the vibes of what these tracks are. That's a pretty wild concept to think about. That's like armchair booking, but or armchair quarterbacking, but it is wild to think about that, having that much more time, and also going, yeah, we had to write 2 tracks a week before we got in here.
Yeah. I kind of like, obviously I am not gonna say anything bad about this record, but first of all, there are 5 tracks. One of them is like a reprise and it's like horns and piano.
Yeah.
kind of like the last half of the first song, like some other Thou songs, it's kind of just one riff repeated a lot of times. And that is also kind of the thing with Another World is Inevitable, is a lot of the back half of that song is the same thing. So it's kind of like a lot of the heavy lifting are tracks 2 and 3, which they do a lot of fucking heavy lifting. Those are like really great Thou songs, and even the other 2 Thou songs are phenomenal. But I think I understand what he's saying when he says that.
In the same breath, there's a quote from Andy, and it kind of makes me think like, okay, well, even if maybe that you feel like there's some things left on the table, I think because of this record, you're able to write a Heathen, you're able to write a Magus. Andy says in that same Decibel interview, ever since Summit, I feel like we've gotten more and more anal about how a record sounds, especially a full length. So this is a pivotal turning point for the band. So I think you kind of have to look at it as like, okay, from here on out, it's all like whatever the fuck we want to do, whatever we want to try, we're going to think about every little piece of how this works. And I think that is like certainly evident in pretty much everything this band does, from the record to how a package comes out, like as far as like the record, which we mentioned before, bands they tour with, who they associate themselves with, like how they just operate as a band. So I think there is like a thought to everything they do. And not that it didn't happen before on other records, but maybe there is like an overall like goal in mind or something that happens on Summit, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's a very smart way of thinking about it, because even a band that has the punk rock ethics that this band does and is rooted in, it's very nice to hear that, you know, thinking of it in that way where everything, there's a goal in line, right? What do we consider success, right? What is success to the group of people that are in Thou? And basing everything off of, we're not gonna bend to anybody. We're not gonna essentially sell out. We're not gonna turn our backs on our beliefs, anything like that. And going with that, and as you said, touring with the bands that they want to tour with, associating themselves with the record labels they want to associate with, dealing with the bookers, dealing with musicians, that sort of thing. That's a very noble thing, but also having the forethought to go, this is what we consider this band. This is how we want to view it. This is success to us. We want to do everything by these rules that we've created for ourselves. That's a very noble and very, respectful way to kind of lead a band. And a lot of bands that are at differing levels should probably look at themselves and go, hey, this is what we want to achieve. If their achievement is we want to play stadiums, make that your thing. Do that your thing. That's what you want to do. Go for it. If you're like, you know what, we just want to put out the most abrasive material we possibly can and do whatever we want, then that's your goal. Have those goals. It's okay to, but just be realistic about it.
You can still be the punkest band in the world and just take it seriously. Like, they are just making art that they want to make and taking it seriously. And they're just like, we're not gonna fucking go up on stage and piss in somebody's mouth and wipe shit on our own chests. And
who are you referring to? I don't know.
Who would you be talking about?
Fucking get completely fucking wasted and play horribly.
Bob Hope. It's probably used.
That sick son of a bitch, Bob Hope. Didn't do anything for anyone. Just that sick bastard.
But yes, I totally agree with you. I didn't mean to just completely derail that. But you want to get into the album?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. By endurance, we conquer. 9-minute opening track. Another one that kind of eases you into the single. Another one that kind of like eases you into the record, right? It feels like when I listened to the Tyrant, it felt like the guitars were kind of, there's things going on. It feels like we're warming up. We're stretching a little bit, like we're just getting ready for what the album is about to bring us. And then we get fucking blast beats, which I'd imagine it's maybe hard for me now being used to this band and knowing what they're capable of. I would have loved to have been a person to have heard those first 2 records and then turn this on and let her go like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, what is happening here? Like, this is crazy. It just comes out swinging. There's a lot of like really cool, this part, especially with the blast beats, but then there's like a lot of like double bass parts that Terry does on this record that are really, really fucking cool.
A fucking lot of them. I mean, just knowing along that you've got blast beats starting the record out. Like, yeah, we've all listened to death metal and that's a very prominent thing. But when a band doesn't use that as its main drum take or its main drum part, and it uses it tastefully in these kind of odd songs, man, it has an impact. You guys have more history with this band than I do on its catalog. To my knowledge, this is the first thing they've done with blast beats up to this point.
I mean, you listen to the full lengths, I may have to like go back and dig through like the EPs and the splits and stuff like that. But from what I know, I think this is like easily the first iteration of it. I think you would get it later for sure on like the collab with Mizmor, but as far as we can tell, this was like the first time.
And they were just like, you know what, Terry, go the fuck off. You know, we're not going to tell you to do anything. Just do your thing.
Yep.
You want a blast beat? You want to play gravity rolls at 350 BPMs? Go for it, bud.
I love when it gets into like the kind of the next riff after the blast beat part. His placement of the snare is just like kind of different every time through the riff, and I love that. It's a really fun thing. I know
when I noticed that, like I couldn't tell if it was like maybe just because I am so in that like 4/4 type of brain way of thinking, but like it was like, is that off? Where is that at? Where the fuck is like what is he doing? And you notice it because like I mentioned, that snare is like, it's very like pop, like you can hear it. So it's not like you're gonna miss it. So it was definitely like, oh wait, am I fucking up? Where is my brain like missing this?
I love that shit. I love the where's the snare thing. And it's probably in 4/4. That's the thing.
That's 3.
Is it 3? But it's like the snare hitting at different points and doing all of that is like, it's like, all right, I'm infinitely more interested now. He may have known this was going to be his last record before the record was done, because it definitely seems like with his performance, I mean, it fits all the parts. It's not like he's just doing a wank fest. But it definitely seems like, you know what? If this is my last record or last major release with this act, I'm going to make this something memorable. And he definitely does, because like he's playing like a black metal drummer or a death metal drummer at this point. But he does it with a style, right? It's not just blast beat, double kick. It's not mix and repeat. There's definitely a vibe to it, and there's still a swing, which this band is known for.
I was just gonna say his accents on the fucking ride cymbal during the like kind of arpeggiated picking parts of the song. I really love those too. I love those all the time when any band plays them. The song that it reminds me of every time I hear it though is kind of the bridge of Outshined. The drummer plays the accents on the yeah. I fucking love that shit.
I'm glad you pointed out the kind of arpeggiated thing. That's an overarching theme on the whole record, are those arpeggiated notes. And that's the first instance of that's a black metal trope, like that arpeggiate. It's just not tremolo picked.
Right.
This is the first time I've really heard Mitch's playing cut through. You can just hear it. It's kind of a click, but there's a fuzz under it that adds to that. But this is the first time I've actually heard him cut through in the mix well. You can kind of hear him in some of the more quieter parts on the records. And when you're a bass player and you're fighting guitars tuned to like G and F sharp, and you're having to fit into that mix somehow. I mean, fuck, the drums might as well have a bass amp plugged into them at this point with this band. But hearing him cut through is really nice. This track kind of has like a trance-like feel in the middle of it. Very Wolves in the Throne Room kind of thing. This is a great fucking opening track to a record. The band maybe isn't maybe this isn't their record that they think the highest of just because of some scheduling stuff and the stress under it. But man, I heard that opening track, was like, I'm fucking sold. I am sold on the rest of this record already.
There's some really great layers on this as well. There's like, I think you can definitely hear it in a few songs on this album with like some of the like acoustic parts as well.
Oh man, yeah.
There's a really, I want to say like solo, but there's like definitely that kind of like lead line that kind of help, orchestrate that emotion that they're trying to convey in the song. There's also, I could like every time I hear this record, again, sign of a good record, you kind of pick up on things that you may not have noticed before. There's like this, maybe like a tape delay effect on one of the guitars at a certain point. When you're listening to it, I was like, what is that thing? It's like
keeps going.
You can't quite hear it, but it's there.
On that, I'm not convinced that if it's not a tape delay, it could be something akin to that. It could have been at this time, Fernandez had a pickup that it came out. It was called I think it was called a sustainer, Fernandez sustainer pickup. Basically, you would flip a switch or twist a knob, and it would take a note and it would sustain it for a long period of time. Or it's an EBow, which is it's a tool that you can use that uses magnets, and you hold it over your strings and you fret the note and it'll sustain it on to make it sound like an organ or something like that.
I don't know. It's like, it's playing the part, like it's playing the notes and stuff, but it's like it's only in like one section that I really noticed it. And so I'd be interested to hear what that's all about. One of my final thoughts on this song in particular was Brian's vocals, of course. There's a part totally towards the end where, it's like layered, and it's like, I feel like I'm trapped on both sides. It's like so claustrophobic if you're like listening with like headphones on. And then he gets to that final line of like come crashing down, and it's like
the ending of this song, it modulates, but it gets lower and lower and lower. And I've only heard one other track really do something like that, and it's a modern day Cannibal Corpse track. It's on the Violence Unimagined album. They had a single off that album that there's a breakdown in it, and they just get lower and lower and lower to the point that you just want to rip whatever is near you apart. And I heard that as the ending part of this track and was just, I'm done. Like, just give me more of this shit.
This is another, like the last 4 minutes of the song or something is this riff over and over and over again. And this riff comes back as the reprise at the end of the album too.
All you need is one riff, like Nas said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nas and Crowbar, they're always talking about the same.
Hey man,
the same things.
That Crowbar song, "The World Is Yours." That's what Kirk was saying. Crowbar's Illmatic, love it.
My God.
Then you get to the second track of the record. Again, an all-timer for me, no questions about it. One of the most melodic pieces on the record. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, who taught you that guitar riff?
Did you teach me? Was it? Yeah.
I did teach you that. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Thanks, bud.
Who else would have taught you that?
I'm not like a bass player by any means, but like if there were a bass around, like my brother used to have one kind of sitting at our house here, and I will just like I'm always like
four strings.
It's like so fun, and I never quite remember exactly how it is, so I'm like always trying to like sing it out as I'm doing it, but it's so fun to play. It's meandering. It's like this thing where it's like kind of like feel sad, and you're just like dragging your fucking hands in the ground or whatever. It's so good. And there's so many cool riffs in this song. There's so many like takes and variations in different parts that I really fucking enjoy.
There's some Southern rock shit in this song. My God, if you sped it up and you had dudes with like Les Pauls playing it with like overalls on, there is some Southern rock shit on this track. And I heard that, I was like, fuck, that's Give Me Back. It's not Give Me Back My Bullets, but it's fucking there.
I don't think I ever noticed the second riff in the song, the riff that's immediately after that riff that you know. It's like where the song gets heavy. I never noticed that there's piano doubling every like the entire the entire riff note for note, piano doubling the whole thing. Never noticed that.
Emily McWilliams, Silver Godling, is such a integral part of what makes the song work to me. That piano part, it like adds such an eerie vibe to it, especially towards the end of the song where it has that kind of like, it's like off key, it's off time, and it's just like, wow, I want to go lay in bed. Like, this is crazy. This is like so, it's like why it's like part of my, I leading up to this record, I would like our episode on this record rather, I would just sit and like, I'd go through the song and start from the beginning. Like I would just listen to this on repeat. It's one of my favorites for sure. And the piano definitely adds to it. It's like kind of buried in there. So you can't quite hear it all the time, but it's definitely there.
Yeah. And
the lead lines too, are, again, very melodic. And I mean, the whole thing's like melodic. It's stuck in my head. It's like, I remember it instantly.
So the lead lines in this is, I alluded to this when we were talking about Peasant. The mixing on this album is fucking tremendous. There is a lead line playing on the left, and then on the right, the band is just playing a fat fucking riff the entire time.
Yeah.
And like it almost feels like the lead line doesn't even go with it, but there's that kind of tonal center and it's there, but it's like, what are we doing? It's almost like the kind of slide guitar part on Tyrant. It's very reminiscent, and I love that the mixing on this record just, to me, is leaps and bounds different from the mixing on Peasant. And it's like, oh, okay, this band's going further, like they're stepping further. They know they still want it to be dense and heavy, but they want it to have surprises. This is one of those records, I mean, you just brought it up, hearing the piano line follow every guitar part. This is one of those records you put on and you hear something different each time you put it on.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to hear another aspect to that layer. And it's a good mix, a good production can really make a good record sound great.
I messaged y'all last week when I started listening to this album in preparation, but 5 minutes in, there's just the metal pause or like the hold or whatever. And I was like driving when it was like my first time listening. Listening in preparation. And I was like, just like, ah!
It's a great song. It's like got these big parts of like, what Dylan's talking about with that lead line. And then you have the band kind of holding down the foundation. It almost kind of goes into this like big jam, I think, like this big, there, everybody's just, there's like all these different swells and sounds going on before it just kind of cuts out to that like cleaner part with the piano. And
the piano's fucking dissonant. It's not even melodic. It's like you hear it and you're going, hold on. Because it doesn't quite fit exactly. It's not playing note for note. And that's with like the snare misplacement we talked about earlier. It's almost like Terry took what the guys that were playing guitar did on the last record and just like, hey, I'm just going to move this drum hit around a little bit to make it more interesting and to make it fun. And hearing that dissonant piano is wild, because even on records as like heavy, as thick as these, you don't really hear dissonant piano. Like that's a very Thelonious Monk kind of thing. Like what's the story? Everybody went to see Thelonious Monk one time. He walked in, everyone bought tickets for it. He slammed the fucking lid down on the grand piano, dinged the note as hard as he could, and walked off, and that was the show. And it's like, God, there's an aspect to it that's that, and I fucking love that.
I don't know exactly what the lyrical themes are about, and I feel like I heard this in an interview once, and I tried to track it down, where I think it was a podcast, and I apologize that I couldn't find it. I couldn't remember the name of it. But it was like Brian and Mitch, I believe, talking with these guys, and they're very much like into comic books and like graphic novels and stuff. And I think Chrysicon may have something to do with like some sort of like sci-fi novels. I think there is an element of that in there. I could be wrong, but I want to say it was this song when they were talking about it. And maybe it was like, it reminded me maybe of Wheel of Time. I don't know if you've ever read any of those like big, thick ass, there's a million of them. And I remember they had them at the library and I didn't know what they were. And I was like, the cover looks cool. Like we all see covers and I'm like, wow, this looks neat. I think it was like the 4th book and I grabbed it and I was like, started reading. I'm like, I don't fucking understand a whole, like I get to just drop in the middle of a story. I don't even know if it's like, I just didn't know. So I think, obviously there's a lot of, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I think there's a lot of elements that go into, the theme or the kind of arc of the record. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be struggles within our own world. I think there's definitely some fantastical elements on this that maybe I didn't notice on the previous record. There's some references that will pop up later on this album that I was like, oh, I looked that up and I was like, never heard of that before.
Yep.
Wood elves. Cool. Whatever.
It's not about lizard people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's not about lizard people. However, I would take a hard guess about what Prometheus is about. It's definitely not a Ridley Scott movie.
It's that show, Prometheus and Bob.
Yes. Yeah.
That was it.
My God, the Prometheus and Bob tales.
There is a fucking line in the middle of Prometheus that's like, the fire in your heart is out or something like that. And I was like, that's sad. That's just fucking devastating. Fuck.
You're just a dead man walking. That's all it is. Like I messaged the group a couple nights ago. I was like, this is it. This is the track. Like this is rad. And it's 11 minutes, excuse me, of just riff after fucking riff.
It's another one that goes right out of the gate too. Like it hits. The one thing I noticed about the song too is it is like very heavy and it hits you, but it's also very atmospheric. There's a lot of like Sabbath-esque parts as well in this song. This was also maybe some of those like kind of more, I don't know, like single picked, like those, I want to say arpeggiated, but that's kind of where I noticed like the production, like these are the tones are a little bit sharper, a little bit more clear to like kind of comprehend. Yes.
I will say this track is you could probably take this track and present it to like a mixer or an engineer or something like that and go, hey, we want it to sound as clean as this. And like, yeah, it's an underground metal record, but still a very clean sounding track. Like everything is played as it should be. Everything sounds good. It's mixed really well. Again, another track, you can hear the rhythm section really playing with each other on it. The bass, again, you actually hear Mitch doing walking bass lines in certain parts of it. And it just, again, the band is in like full form on this track to me.
I really loved the first riff, the interplay between the guitars. I fucking love that. This album is like they really figured out having two guitarists the most on this album. Like later they add more guitarists, but
yeah,
like this is like the best they have sounded as two guitarists so far.
They have there's like the lead line in this cuts through everything, like because obviously there's a lot of like dynamics on this track, a lot of instrumentation, as we've kind of mentioned, with like some acoustic guitars. You have the viola, trombone, and that like why are we building such a big ship orchestra with that horn section? But then to have that lead line cut through so well, the recording on this record, James like definitely had a good sense about like where everything kind of sat in the song. That lead line, it felt very 90s alt rock, very grunge vibe to me, like cutting through there. So there's a little bit of that influence cutting through on this song.
You know, we've talked about this band for a while, but I don't think we necessarily forget, but we just haven't brought that back out again of like, oh yeah, these guys essentially are playing grunge filtered through the swamp. In a facet. But the production is so natural sounding too. Like it definitely sounds like a band. They may have tracked it. I'm sure they probably recorded in a room together, but I'm sure drums might have been tracked later. or at a different point. But this is definitely where this is the track that the blackest kind of element started to come out. When I really started to go, oh, okay. These guys definitely were listening to probably second wave or maybe first wave black metal. Some of the US stuff, obviously they've shared a label with some of them. Like I really got a grasp of that on this track, as well as the ending of the next track of that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not an easy track to listen to because it's dense, it's long, there's a lot of parts. But as Swindle talked about earlier, each part doesn't necessarily repeat a lot. So you are getting like these different feels and these different vibes, be it the feel of the drums changes, or a drone is played slightly different, or it's bent differently. God, these guys put a lot of time into this album, and it's very evident. And there was only a 2-year gap between Peasant and Summit. So to think about that and go, man, when is the song done? When are you done with the track? When do you go, it's good? It's never really done from an artist perspective. It's just, it's good enough. You know, this is where we have to draw the line. And then you play them live. Like, I've never been in a band that's played probably anything longer than a 5-minute song. So, especially something like this where it is so feel-based. You've got the air kind of playing. You know, the crowd may delegate like how long apart you play it. You know, you draw the pause out a little bit longer. This track got me excited to see what the next 2 records are going to feel like overall. Like with all of this.
There's a riff like 2/3 into this song that it's a very simple riff, but it's in like 3. And the riff is just quarter notes. So it's like da 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 da. And I was like, it's just fucking, the walls are closing in. There's no space for me to exist within these notes. Like, it's just, yeah, like push me out and the space is just occupied by notes at this point.
Don't need to exist anymore, you know?
I've grown quite tired of living, rather.
Yeah, when old Gil, like when you hear stuff, when you hear albums like this and tracks like this, that's, you know, I talked about how Spiderland felt claustrophobic. That's always a good signifier of when it's really good, depressing music. Is like, are the walls closing in? Do I feel like I'm in that hole and I can never come out? You know, am I stuck in a room with an orange man screaming? Like, God, like more of this shit. And I'm sure more is to come.
Track 4, going from an 11-minute song to a 10-minute track, Another World is Inevitable. I think kind of that, you know, theme that we've touched on with a lot of this music, repetition, just beating you over the fucking head. Yeah, that opening riff is like crazy.
Everyone is just, they're just droning on that low string and passing the notes on the higher string, and it's every instrument playing that way. I could hear the fucking hi-hat just falling over, just that simple, just big open hi-hat and just kick and snare. Like, you speed that up, it's the boats and hose thing from like Step Brothers, but when it's slowed down and you got a loose hi-hat, like, my God, you could decimate a planet.
I love the palm muted, chunky at the very beginning, and then they add the hammer-on like part to the riff. It was just that's so fucking effective.
It's so melodic.
Yeah.
Woof. It modulates, and I couldn't think of anything that it really sounded like. I was like, fuck, this is so familiar. Like, I couldn't even find a good reference point, but when that hits, when it transitions from that big drone to that, it's like, oh man, this is satisfying.
Yeah.
This
was a track where I noted Mitch, you could hear Mitch's bass playing definitely kind of cutting through on this one as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Brian in this track is like, this is where it really dawned on me, like how well he's mixed on this record to feel like a presence. It's not just like, I'm the vocalist, like I mentioned earlier. He's a presence. He's there for you to go, oh, that's terrifying. Whatever he's talking about is absolutely terrifying. I can't quite understand it. I need to go look at the lyrics. Oh God, no.
So much of this song is the same like rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of like it put me in a trance.
Yeah.
It all feels so similar, and it's such a long song too.
It's that intro comes back a couple times in the track, and I like how they come back to it. The feel of the drums is different under it each time, although that brick that they're just all hammering in is there. The horns, I didn't really get a chance to kind of talk about the horns in the last track. The horns and the strings are definitely in feel with, man, it sounds like something off of Behemoth's The Apostasy, which is wild. Because like hearing horns, strings are normal, but hearing horns like tuba, trombone, French horn isn't really common in any type of music, really. Maybe like Zydeco or like big band stuff or like jazz, it's a little more common. But hearing it and how it swells, it definitely feels like, again, gearing up for war.
Yeah.
But this track with the way that intro riff comes back, and they bring it back the second time they bring it back, there's vocals over it now. And it's just, fuck. It just, you could almost feel the strings just sliding off the neck with how hard they're gripping the guitar. My God. And it just, to end an album on this track is perfect. I know this track really doesn't have a ton of parts to it, but that ending part is kind of in line with some of the other tracks on the album where it is like 4 to 5 minutes of that same part, just kind of further expanding, right? And this one does kind of the reverse where there was the track, Grisicon, I think, has the ending part that kind of gets thinner as we go, or maybe it's the opening track. This one actually layers up, like it like builds into it. And I heard that and went, that's when I like surmised that Thou wrote a black metal record and this is it. And I heard that with the way the guitars are played, the way the drums are played under it. I went, yep, it's getting real grim in this room right about now.
The drums definitely are building the entire last track, like the whole time.
Talking about that horn section, kind of carrying over into the Summit reprise, like a couple minutes. It's an instrumental song, of course, but that horn section and that deep bass sound that's occurring, it gave me like a very medieval kind of thing.
100%.
Like
biblical.
the knights, kind of going into maybe even the next song, into the wilderness to fight some sort of beast in a cave or whatever. Then, and there's like even that like more traditional kind of drum sound that's occurring on here as well. It's like there's so much. It's very unique. I'm glad that this is included on the album. But I even got like even a big city kind of vibe towards the end, and then it made me think of a later record, Imperial Triumphant's Alphaville, and how that kind of sets the stage a little bit.
Okay.
With some of those sections of like being in a big city, they clearly had. On that record, they clearly had a theme in mind. Like those people are from New York. They wanted to put that in the record, maybe even an era of New York.
Right.
And they did that well. We're here, like, man, I think it like really sets it. If they were going the way I took it in my caveman brain was just like some knights with some like flags on horses. They're going off to fight some beast. And like that's what I took from it. And, going into the next song, I think you even kind of get some of that too.
With the reprise, I definitely got like, for some reason, my brain was transferred over to Apocalypse Now. Is it Kurtz? Is it Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now? I think that's right. Brando's playing like those close-ups of him where he's in the black and like those traumatic scenes of the killing of the bull and all that. Like, oh my God, this sounds like the end of a war. This sounds like the end of some sort of great biblical battle. This sounds like very much to what you were saying too. It sounds like the end of some sort of like crusade almost.
What a way to end the album. Or kind of end the album.
I think with every of their albums, it's kind of.
Yeah.
In somebody's album ends there.
Some version got ended.
Going into that and the The final track of the album, though, Voices in the Wilderness, another 10 and a half long track. That classic kind of warm up where you really get into the thick of it. There's this melodic twin guitar, arrangement on this song that reminded me of Soundgarden when I listened to it.
Me too. Yo,
yeah. Right?
Yes.
Like it just put me right back on Bad Motorfinger or whatever we were, when we were listening to those records. Total Soundgarden type of riff.
In Monstrance is the fucking song. The end of Tyrant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That the last riff on that album is like very similar. It reminds me of Soundgarden for the same exact reason, like that same sound. I don't know if it's Phrygian, if that is the key, like the mode that it is written in, but it also kind of is like a Middle Eastern feel for whatever the fuck that means. Like we decided it was Middle Eastern sound.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it also reminded me of fucking Soundgarden too. So hard.
So I obviously was confused because the version of the album I had was 5 tracks. And, in a panic, I really only got to sit down with this track maybe once or twice today. And what I actually focused on with this track was the lyrics. We were talking about going to war or having to have a fight. And, the death throes of daylight set the sky ablaze. That's the opening fucking line.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, like I've got impaled bodies tattooed on my arm. Like definitely reminiscent of like, Vlad Tepes, like just putting people on pikes. I don't know what the song's about, but the mental images I was getting while reading the lyrics along to the track definitely fits in vein with what the album is overarchingly about. It evokes a vibe. Again, I don't necessarily know if this track fits the album. I like the way it ends with that reprise, or it ends with the last track. I do think this would have been a good like B-side or something that would have came with like a split or standalone track. It's a very good track. But I don't know if it fits the vibe of the album for me.
I don't know if I would prefer it over Grisicon or Prometheus, like what Austin, you were saying they said like about the album.
If
it had been on the album, it would have been instead of one of those two, or maybe it was Another World is Inevitable.
It said Brian said if we hadn't had other records on our plate, we probably could have included Voices in the Wilderness or something. So maybe like, and then there was another song, Bonnet Care. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but then he's like, then again, if we had included those songs, which we had written earlier on, we wouldn't have had the pressure on us to write Grisicon or Another World is Inevitable.
Yeah, I don't know if I would rather have this song than those, but I do think this, like, listening to those compilations, you can tell when it's this era of Thou.
Right.
I think that this sounds like this album, and is a great song too. But I think it could have fit like into the album. Maybe like at like this is song 2, but then Grisicon is song 3 or whatever. But I don't think it necessarily would have had to come after the reprise.
Gotcha.
Lyrically, I feel like I have heard or read Brian say like whether it's something he agrees with or not, it's like taking those extremes of like one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And like, seems like, weak, get rid of the weak or something. Like it was such a, whoa, man, we were fucking going for it. The end of the song with the kind of collective humming and the acoustic and the piano outro. Love it.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Great close.
One thing I have thought has been funny about myself is I only have 2 modes kind of listening to music. And one mode is the song can only be 40 seconds and there has to be 5 parts. And the other mode is repeat this part for 7 minutes.
So now that we've kind of come out on the other side of these two records, what are your thoughts? So what are you feeling? What are we looking forward to?
Really nothing, because I'm depressed as hell. I am completely void of any emotions and feeling right now. As kind of a first-time listener of this band, as in-depth as this is, I'm really enjoying what I've heard so far. It definitely makes me want to go back and hit the compilations at a certain point. Maybe I give myself a break a little while, listen to something upbeat for a minute.
Banana Split soundtrack.
The Banana Split soundtrack, repressed on Record Store Day on red vinyl, 180 gram. But the hearing it is just getting me more excited to go, okay, where are the other New Orleans bands? Because really, where are the newer modern New Orleans bands? Where do we have them? That was such a big presence. You had Harp for a while, and they've kind of disappeared. But just overall, I'm really enjoying this so far. And I know, like, I've probably a little bit more familiar with Heathen and Magus, but these first three have been fucking fantastic records to listen to. This is definitely my favorite out of the three. Tyrant a close second, and obviously Peasant would be on the third end of that. Now I want to see where we're at with the next two albums. Those are pretty dense records, for sure. Yes, they are
long records.
I feel like I've climbed a big mountain and got to the top of, like, you know, where, like, man, whew,
summit.
Can't believe I just
the summit.
The summit. I feel like I just got to the summit, and I'm like, man, I'm glad that's over. And then I look up, and there's like, holy fuck, we still got it. And that doesn't mean, not to say that this is like challenging in a way that is like, wow, this is such a fucking drudge to get through. Like, no, this is like, it's very emotional. It's very pummeling. It's like, yeah, maybe not. It's not always an easy listen to, but
give it
like,
the respect it deserves.
Yeah. You have to, these are songs that, like, yes, they can exist on their own, but you should find the time to sit down with these records and really enjoy them. And so that
75 minutes.
If that's like all this was, like, doing this as a deep dive series and like just being like forcing yourself to listen to the record as a whole thing, then, you know, job well fucking done. We did it, but still got a couple more to go.
I've listened to exclusively sad music for decades, so this, like, say nothing. This ain't nothing.
Fucking tough guy over here. Oh, look at it. I'm sadder than everybody.
I'm the saddest person on the planet. Nothing can make me sadder. Oh, I can sit through the Futurama episode Dog Day Afternoon and not shed a fucking tear. I'm Justin fucking Swindle. Fuck everyone.
My pants are sadder than your pants.
Long albums make me so grumpy. Just them existing. So I'm not especially looking forward to listening to two different, like, I'll listen to Heathen every day until we record the episode once. So that means I'll listen to the 75-minute record 7 days in a row, and then I'll have to do it again with Mages.
Hell yeah.
Long records don't bother me if the songs are good, if they make sense, if the subject matter's good. Like, I remember buying, Typo Negative's Dead Again when it came out. It's a 77-minute album. And I love every track on it. If it's good, it makes sense. But if you got a long record and there's 6 tracks of fucking filler and each of those tracks are 5 to 6 minutes long, get that shit out of my face.
Yeah.
Get it out of here. You know, Holy Mountain's better than Dope Smoker. It just fucking is.
You hear that, Dan?
Good songs.
You hear that, Dan? If you're listening to this, shout out Dan. Shout out to Dan. Love that band. I'm going to see them this weekend.
Good.
Terminator Timeline, but no,
Terminator Timeline.
They were great. I saw them. They were great.
They were great when I saw them last week.
Yes, last weekend. It was a good time. All right, we've reached that point of the episode where we like to talk about the things we've been listening to, the things that we've been enjoying. I've been listening to a lot of Thou, so Thou has been on my brain, and so have the side projects. Swindle mentioned Andy's project Supplicate last week. So I'm going to mention Mitch and Matthew's project this week, Big Garden. It features Mitch and Matthew of Thou. I think it also has a member of Dowsing on this record as one of the members of this band. Yeah. Crazy. Chicago.
Which do you, Marcus?
Like I'm not sure.
Okay.
I did a radio show about this band, Music Telephone, and I connected them with a huge influence of this band, Stone Temple Pilots. So like through the liner notes and everything like that, I looked up all the members, and yeah, somebody in Dowsing is in this band, which is pretty rad.
Weird. Wild.
If you liked the grunge and like 90s alt rock influences of Thou, this is just it. That it's like all of that in a record. So you can just own it and enjoy it. I would highly recommend it. This came out last year, and it was a lot of fun to do the show on and also listen to all the time. It was awesome.
There's in between songs, they have like a recording of them talking. That was like, we should put a speaking interlude in the song, and it's like the person recording them or something just saying like, y'all should find something to speak and say, and we'll put it in the album. But they just put the dude saying that in the album. There's like 3 tracks where they do that. And I think on Spotify, they pulled those interludes out. Like you could see them in the track listing, but you can't listen to them anymore.
Remarkable.
That's so funny.
Someone might have got mad.
This essentially started as a like weekly, I don't want to call it like a podcast, but it was like a video series that Mitch used to do called Big Garden that he would have interviews on and do skits. And then it took life transitioning into the band. And so I think we're all better for it. So To the Rhine, definitely check it out. Take a listen. It's a lot of fun.
I've been listening to a friend of the show, Alex Wallwork's band Amblayer. They released an album in early April called Amblayer. I am not sure. I think that recording features a former member of Hum that has since passed away. But yeah, I've been listening to that. I think it was released on Melodic Virtue.
Does it have Amblayer by Amblayer from Amblayer on it?
There it is.
That would be sick.
So I got 2, actually. I want to bring up, if I wasn't already listening to long and heavy fucking music, I decided to listen to the newest Bong Ripper album.
Hell yeah.
Empty, Chicago's own, right? 4 tracks, hour and some change. It's instrumental. I believe they're straight edge, which is even better. Give it a shot, read a book, listen to it, flip your couch over, disturb the cats a little bit. It's great. It's awesome. I've never really given this band much time, but like, this is awesome.
I think they got emo ties too. I think Bong Ripper is the band that has members of, or a member of the not metal band Castavet. I made you listen to them last time we came to Chicago.
That's true. And I definitely, they are, I'm pretty sure, straight edge, or at least don't smoke weed. Somebody of the Chicago music scene told me that one time. We were just like, a band from tour had like asked them directly, was like, is it true those guys don't smoke weed? And I'm like, I don't think so. They like, what?
Couldn't fathom it. That's great. Yeah. That's one of the best jokes. That is like Mel Brooks level of comedy. That
could have been our fucking our fucking first band almost had the name Weed Withdrawals.
God, that's right. Speaking of, when we got off air, I have another idea. But the second album is more of a kind of on a somber note. We lost Eddie Leeway of the New York hardcore legends Leeway. I've been a big fan of their album Born to Expire for a lot of years, so I had to put that on. If this album would have came out when it was actually recorded, it would have been bigger than Cro-Mag's Age of Quarrel. Great record, great songs. Mark of the Squealers on there. Give it a listen. R.I.P. Eddie Leeway.
Yeah, check it all out. We'll be back next week with maybe another part of this, maybe an interview. Have to stay tuned to figure out. We'll get into that a little later. Follow us at Riff Worship Pod, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads for all updates on this show, as well as the live show Vocal Distortion, which airs every Monday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on FM 89. We also have our playlists, Hits from the Crypt. Dylan organizes that one on Apple Music. And I do riffs on repeat, which is on Spotify. Yeah, we're having a good time.
Leaving me out here, man. We got the Dillbozers Den that drops every Friday.
Oh yeah, you do that. That's pretty cool.
I do that. We got the Dillbozers Den. You guys gave me a live mic and a quiet room. That's the worst thing you guys could have ever done.
It's my favorite thing to edit because you're just literally yelling at yourself,
punching myself in the head.
I like go to school. I'm a full-time student, and it is so funny to come home, take my hat off, put on my baggy clothes, and then turn on the video that Dylan sent over where he is just like, fuck, shit. Definitely check it out. Always some great reviews of some more like modern releases. So if you're ever wondering like, hey, what should I be listening to? Check out Dylan's video series. Like it's a good time for sure. We also have an email now too. So if you ever want to reach out that way and say, hey, tell us what we're doing wrong. I'm sure it's a lot of it.
Would love to hear that.
riffworshippod@gmail.com. But until then, for myself, for Swindle, for Dylan, for Thou, we'll catch you next time. Bye.